deep dive. Today we're looking at something really interesting you sent over. It's this viral video out of the U.S.,
Hmm.
and it talks about a proposed, get this, economic bunker buster. Sounds intense,
It
right?
definitely does. Sounds pretty dramatic.
Yeah, so we want to unpack what this potential sanctions bill actually is and, what it could mean, especially for a country like India, given, well, everything going on between the U.S., Russia, and China.
Absolutely. And what's really fascinating, I think, is how just one proposed law can really shine a light on the big picture. The power dynamics, the economic games being played.
Right.
So we'll try to synthesize what's in the material, not just what they're talking about, but maybe why it matters so much right now with these rising powers and existing tensions.
Okay, let's dive in then. That name itself, bunker buster. I mean, the video mentions Senator Lindsey Graham.
Yes, that's right.
He used that term talking about actual bombs. The B-2 bomber hitting targets in Iran related to their nuclear program.
Physical destruction.
Exactly. And then he takes that idea, that same name, and applies it to economics, an economic bunker buster.
Mm.
So what does that actually mean? What are we looking at here?
Well, fundamentally, this economic bunker buster, as the source calls it, is it's a proposed sanctions bill.
Okay.
And its main goal, described in the material, is pretty straightforward. Go after any country buying uranium, natural gas, or oil from Russia.
Any country. That's broad.
Very broad. If it were to pass, it means huge sanctions, trade barriers.
Yeah.
Basically, a severe penalty for anyone doing that kind of business with Russia.
Wow.
Yeah, and the source material we looked at, it's quite critical, calls the bill stupid, even says it makes no sense. Pretty strong language.
Okay, yeah, that's direct. But this is where it gets really, really interesting for me, especially concerning India.
Mm-hmm.
Because you look at the U.S.-India relationship, all the cooperations, LAMOA, COMCASA, BECA,
Mm-hmm.
these are significant agreements, right?
Yeah.
Facilitating military logistics, secure
It's
communication.
geospatial intelligence sharing with BCA, yeah.
Yeah, big deals. Big deals. And then there's the NISAR satellite project. They call it the world's most expensive satellite. Joint effort.
Huge investment, yeah.
So you'd think, okay, India's viewed differently. But the source says many U.S. senators apparently talk about India almost like they talk about Russia or China.
Even though, as the source points out, India hasn't really acted against U.S. interests in the way those other countries sometimes have.
Exactly. So what's going on? Why that tone?
Well, it brings up a really fundamental question, doesn't it? How do established powers, like the U.S., view powers that are rising?
Yeah.
The logic presented in the material, it suggests there's almost this historical habit, you could say, for Americans or maybe any dominant power to be suspicious of potential future superpowers or even just strong regional players.
Suspicious by default.
Kinda. The source even mentions a U.S. economist from, I think it was a viral video or short,
Yeah.
who basically said, point blank, once India gets stronger, the U.S. might actually start trying to weaken it. Like they perceive happened with Russia in the past.
Wow. So it's like a playbook.
From a certain historical viewpoint, yeah. It's presented as a kind of statecraft, not necessarily malicious or evil, but strategic. Empires throughout history, British, Russian, Napoleonic, whoever, they often tried to undermine rising competitors. It's seen as, well, strategic survival.
That's a heavy perspective.
It reframes things, doesn't it? And the material also mentions some specific issues, like displeasure from the Trump administration towards India.
Oh, right. What were the examples there?
Well, the source pointed to things like India not buying F-35 jets, defense procurement choices,
Okay.
and then there's a slightly odd detail about India not nominating Trump for the Nobel Prize.
Seriously.
Yeah, whereas Pakistan apparently did nominate him for something about Bitcoin investments, according to the source.
Okay, that is specific and maybe a bit strange.
It certainly shows the complex and sometimes unexpected factors in international relations.
No kidding. Okay, so let's connect this back directly to India and this potential bill. The source says that timing is terrible for India. Why now? What makes the timing so bad? Especially, you mentioned, India has doubled its oil imports from Russia recently.
Right, exactly. And if you look at the bigger context, it becomes clear why the timing is so precarious. There's a lot of instability or potential instability around the Strait of Hormuz.
The oil choke
The
point.
big one. Something
Yeah.
like 20% of the world's oil exports go through there. And the Iranian parliament has reportedly told its military to block it. Now, whether the military actually will, that's another question. But the instruction is there.
So uncertainty.
Huge uncertainty. Now, India has said publicly that they feel somewhat insulated from Hormuz issues because they've secured oil from elsewhere, including, significantly, those larger volumes from Russia.
Okay. So Russia became a key part of their energy security strategy, partly because of Hormuz worries.
Precisely. But now this bill comes along, and it creates this dilemma, a real catch-22 for India.
Either risk the disruption from a potentially closed Strait of Hormuz.
Or buy the Russian oil they need for energy security and face these massive U.S. sanctions.
That's a tough spot. Could the U.S. just offer to sell India oil instead?
Well, the U.S. might offer its own oil, sure, but the source brings up practical problems. Like geographical distance, it takes much longer to ship oil from the U.S. to India than from Russia.
Right. Russia's much closer.
Much closer. And there are also questions raised in the material about whether the U.S. even has the capacity to export that much oil on the scale India might need reliably.
So proximity and volume concerns with the U.S. as an alternative.
Exactly. Russia's just geographically a more convenient and arguably a more tested large-scale supplier for India in this context.
Okay, so India's really squeezed here.
Hmm.
Facing potential Hormuz disruption on one side, potential U.S. sanctions on the other if they rely on Russia. What happens if this bill actually goes through? Are there potential outs? Maybe exceptions for countries like India?
That's the hope expressed in the source material. That maybe there's enough good sense, as they put it, in the U.S. Congress to carve out exceptions. You know, recognizing the complexities for nations like India.
Is that likely?
Hard to say. But the source points to another, maybe bigger, implication. If this economic bunker buster really does end up hitting India, China, and Russia,
Yeah.
it could actually backfire. It
Right.
could push those three countries much closer together, force them into a tighter, more unified bloc out of necessity.
Like an unintended consequence.
Exactly. The Russian foreign minister has apparently already been talking publicly about reviving the RIC triad. That's Russia, India, China.
The REC grouping.
Yeah. So this U.S. action, aimed perhaps at isolating Russia or managing China-India, could ironically end up strengthening the very alignment it might hope to prevent. It shows how these big geopolitical moves can have unexpected ripple effects.
So we've really dug into this economic bunker buster idea today. It's clear this isn't just some dry economic policy proposal.
Not at all.
It taps into these huge shifts in global power, tough strategic choices countries are facing, and really the whole nature of how countries deal with each other right now. And things are moving fast. The source suggests we should expect updates, and whatever happens will definitely have a big impact, especially on India.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How does a country navigate its own rise when the big established powers seem inherently suspicious?
Yeah.
And what does a tool like this economic bunker buster really signal about the future? Are we heading towards more fragmented economic blocs or new kinds of alliances? What really stood out to you from all this? What's the key takeaway you're pondering?